and welcome to a Sangat television special on Brexit and what's going on. Now, this is a live special show, and you can call in whenever you want. The number is 0121 369 1380. That's 0121 369 1380, and you can ask any question that's on your mind. Today, we've got representatives from three parties. We've got Kieth Rowe from the Brexit Party. Hi, Kieth.
Hi, good to be with you.
We've got Rupinder Singh from the Labour Party.
Hi.
And we've got Julian from the Green Party.
Hi.
So now, on the 23rd of June 2016, the nation voted on the question whether we wanted to remain in the EU or leave the EU. And it looks like 51.9% voted to actually leave the EU. And on that day, we gave a 2-year extension to leave. Well, we triggered Article 50 to leave. And we were supposed to leave the EU on Friday, 29th of March. Now, I'll start with you, Kieth. You know, because now we've got an extension till the 12th of April. And that's the day that we are supposed to be leaving. We've already split that by 2 weeks. What's going on?
Well, who knows? The government seems to be in chaos, really. Mrs May said publicly on camera, I think at least 100 times, we're definitely going to be leaving the EU on March the 29th. And then at the last minute, she goes back on it. She asks for an extension. There's rumours she's going to be asking for even longer extensions, going to the EU with a begging bowl. It's a really undignified way for our government to carry out their business. They've carried out the whole negotiations in a totally amateurish manner. I'll just take slight issue with what you said, because after the referendum, they waited nearly a year before they gave the Article 50 letter into the EU.
Why did they wait a year?
Well, they said that they were trying to get their act together to know exactly what they were asking for. It's quite clear to everybody, whatever side of the fence you're on, they really didn't use that time effectively. They didn't do anything good with it. They didn't come up with a plan. Then they gave in the letter under Article 50, I think perhaps under some pressure to actually eventually do something. And we can see the complete mess that they've made of the whole negotiating process. They've really carried out this in either a totally amateurish fashion, or, as some people think, there was some deliberateness to it, because in the back of their minds, and of course we know that Theresa May was a Remainer, they really wanted to try and find some way to reverse the decision of the people. Either way, it's made our country look like a laughing stock in Europe and across the world, and it's not good enough, frankly, and we expect a lot more from our elected representatives. Our elected representatives, our MPs in Parliament, don't represent the people, because they're in their little bubble, and we know that the majority of MPs wanted us and still want us to remain in the EU. So they're totally coming from a different angle to the angle that the people across the country have come from. And they've, whatever their manifestos have said, and of course anybody standing for election for either the Conservatives or the Labour Party said that they were going to respect the result of the referendum. Their real motive behind it was to try and find a way to keep us in the EU, and that shows through the dreadful negotiations that we've seen.
So Rupinder, you're from the opposition, the main opposition party, which is the Labour Party.
Yes.
Because people are confused. What is your stance? What is the Labour Party stance on Brexit?
Labour Party has been very, very clear from day one. We said we accept the result of the referendum, but we want to maintain the maximum closeness with the EU and all the benefits which come with that. Because for us, it's people's jobs and prosperity is the top priority for us. And we said from day one, on the day one, we said this is our priority. And we have stuck with that, and it is a Conservatives' own making. It was their own internal problem, which they have translated now into a national crisis.
But you say that. So the Labour Party, for example, you're saying that Brexit is important, but for you, jobs and that are more important, which obviously they are for the economy.
Yes.
But most of the people that voted Brexit were Labour Party constituents.
They did. Some of them did. Look, democracy, functioning democracy is not just about votes. It is about having a right.
Well, there were Labour strongholds.
No, they are.
Like the North East, for example.
Two-thirds of Labour voters voted against Brexit.
Okay.
The vote was won by Conservative voters and that minority of Labour voters who often swing between Labour and Conservative. That was who delivered
But
Brexit.
why do you think the Labour voters did vote for?
I'll say it. This is not very complex in a sense that if you have a vote which is not based on the right to information, correct information, if you don't have accountability in the system, if you don't have a scrutiny of the people who run the campaign, if you don't have a control over the finances, how much that is not a real democracy. The democratic process is not just about voting. It is the whole package comes with it. And if you don't respect all those things where you can hold people accountable, what they said, and if it's true or not, if they can lie, if you don't scrutinize what they are saying is based on facts, if you don't give people the right information, if you muddle with the finances set up given by the election commission, that is not a true democracy. That is a Mugabeism.
But what about general
Which is
elections?
why
though,
it's
for
perfectly
example?
reasonable to have a second vote.
Absolutely.
Not
But that's
at
the
all.
same as a general election. If you vote for one party that's come in saying, oh, their manifesto was completely different to what they did in real life, you know, that's how it's always been. You've always voted on a party.
And then you get the chance to vote them out.
But
In 4 years,
just wait a
chance
minute.
to change
but
your mind.
You talk about the misinformation. The Chancellor of the Exchequer at the time, George Osborne, and the Governor of the Bank of England both told us that the day after a vote to leave, the economy would crash, jobs would be lost, the pound would be in the doldrums, it would be terrible. All this scaremongering and Project Fear
You know that
has
we're-
been absolutely wrong. And when you
And
Labour
we're also-
Party talk about jobs, it's quite incredible that despite all this scaremongering, we now find that there are more people in work in this country than ever before. Our manufacturing is booming, according to the latest figures out yesterday. And basically what Labour is saying is trying to make out that leaving the EU will somehow be bad for the economy. It's going to be a boom for the economy as soon as we get out.
You say we were told those things. We were told that the trade deals would be easy to negotiate. How many have we done? About 3 out
Well, we
of the
haven't left yet.
69.
We're not allowed
hang
to
on,
negotiate
hang on.
yet.
No, hang on,
Trade
hang
deals
on.
yet.
And I'm talking now about this. In order to leave, there was a requirement to get to a place where we actually had trade deals with all those places that the EU has trade deals with. 69 trade deals. Something like 2 of them have been sorted out. We were told that would be easy. It wasn't easy. We were told that there'd be 350 million for the NHS. Quite clearly, there isn't going to be 350 million for
more,
the
I
NHS.
should imagine.
Even Farage has admitted that was basically a made-up figure.
Hang on, it wasn't a
No,
Farage
hang on,
figure.
hang on,
That was a Boris Johnson
But
figure.
Farage was happy to stand in front of the bus as well.
No, wrong bus.
So, well, he was happy to go along with that campaiin, and none of that has proved
Wrong
true. So
campaign.
your first question was, what's going on? So
Yeah.
I think that what's been proved. I mean, there's a number of things that's been proved. First of all, we've proved that the Tories can't negotiate, quite clearly. Not just May, but how many Brexit secretaries have we had now? Something like 3 Brexit secretaries. So, there's a problem there. Secondly, we've discovered that there is a hardcore right wing inside the Tory party, which is prepared to crash the economy on ideological
You don't think that's
grounds.
like the public as well? The public are saying that they've had enough of Europe.
People absolutely have had enough, but I think that, I do think we have to look at what's going on behind that. There is clearly an ideologically driven hard right in the Tory party. It's their project, and they are prepared to crash the economy, and they're prepared to put people's jobs at risk, and they're prepared to rip up regulations. They want to do deals with Trump's America. They are desperate. In fact, local MP, one of my local MPs in Shropshire, he went off to Oklahoma, and he was celebrating the trade deals we can do with Oklahoma. That's one state.
Yep.
Ridiculous. The idea that they can, but the reason they're so keen to do all that is because they think that's moving towards
Can I ask
what they
what
see
did
as
Britain-
being a free economy, and what that really means is a regulation-free economy with
What did Britain
clawing
do?
chicken
What did
and
Britain
all of
do
that.
before
Yeah, Project
the
Fierce
EU?
Part 2, obviously.
How did Britain survive before the EU was formed?
How did Britain survive
Yep.
before the EU
Yep.
was formed? So way back in the 1970s.
Yep.
Well,
Oh.
it did trade in a world which was not as joined up as the world is now, in a world actually that doesn't face some of the international problems that we face now, in terms of most obviously climate change and climate breakdown, in a world which just didn't have that level of connectedness. It's ridiculous to talk about. I mean, it is quite funny the way I think some of the Brexiters do see us, desperately trying to return to the early 1970s. The world of I don't know, sort of pre-internet. I mean, that's not where we are now. We're in a connected international
But you put
world.
your finger on part
and
of
the
it.
idea of going back to that situation
international, you
doesn't
just
make
said.
any
International.
sense.
Yeah.
The
We
thing
live
is,
in an
with the
international
internet
world.
now, we can trade across the world far more easily than ever before. And of course, only about 10% of our export trade is actually
No,
with the
that's not
EU.
true. That's
Yes,
not
it is.
true. It's
Most
about-
of other trade that we,
It's
most
not
of the
true. It's
imported
40, what is it,
goods
44% or something
Most-
like that goes through Europe.
goes
to Europe.
through Europe.
No,
but
goes
the-
to Europe.
But the first thing I want to do is dispel this myth that you and many others seem to use this phrase of crashing out. There is no crashing out. If we leave without a negotiated deal, it doesn't mean that the economy falls apart. It doesn't mean that Europe will no longer sell their goods to us. It doesn't mean that if Mercedes want to
No, but
sell
they'll all
us
get
cars,
stuck at Calais,
No,
and
they
then
won't.
they'll get stuck
In
at
fact,
Dover
the mayor
because
of-
all those agreements will have
No,
come
they
to an
won't.
end without anything replacing
In fact, the
them.
mayor of Calais said exactly the opposite. He said the goods will flow exactly the same. All goods
Well,
these days,
Your-
and I've been
The
involved in a
council in
business
Dover
that
don't seem to think that.
Yes, they do, and many others have said it. All of the agreements will carry on anyway in some respect. All goods these days are pre-logged and pre-customs done, all electronically in advance of goods being sent. This whole idea that suddenly there'll be no toilet rolls in the shops and that the hospitals will run out of medicine, it's an absolute myth. It's put out by the Project Fear people just to try and make people think that somehow we are dependent on Europe.
But
we are the fifth biggest economy
you're
in
prepared.
the world.
You're prepared for us just to withdraw, and to go on to WTO.
Well, that's how we
rules.
trade with
Which-
most of
so,
the world.
So the core message of Brexit was taking back control. How much control do we have on WTO rules? Do you think? Is that a democratic
Hang on.
organisation?
Okay, you have to
Is
you
it?
have
Is
to-
the
No.
WTO a
The
democratic
WTO is
organisation?
just a
Let's explain
trading.
the
It's just a
WTO.
trading structure.
It's just a trading
Okay,
structure.
it's a trading
Is
structure.
that any
It's not.
democratic
It's not a
elements at
political
all?
union.
No.
In the way that the European
Which
Union
has-
controls our laws, controls our borders, tells us who we can let into the country.
And who
takes a huge
decides runs
fortune off us
and who
every year.
decides runs the European Union? I'm not a huge fan of the European Union. I should put that out there. But let's just think about it. Who runs the European Union?
The commissioners run the
Governments.
European Union.
Governments appointed by governments.
Unelected
No, hang on.
bureaucrats
All those governments.
who we
all
have
those
no
governments are
chance
in
Hang on,
of
sorry.
kicking out.
Keep
And
it
then
very
there's a
well.
parliament. And then there's a
You-
parliament.
you're saying that-
WTO. Nobody votes for anybody who runs
Would
the
you
WTO.
explain to people after, if we leave, do you want less trade with the EU or you want the same level of trade? If you want
I want more trade.
no, if you want more trade, then you have to make it procedures and rules, everything which keep that trade flowing.
No, wait a
you
minute.
want to impede it.
No. Absolutely
you
wrong.
want to impede it.
Absolutely wrong. Governments.
Hang on a sec.
Governments don't buy goods.
Norway does the same kind of thing which you are asking, that it can free flow. They have no money to make any technology available for all these years, and they have the more patent created in the world per head than anybody else. They have no money to create any technology which you dream.
So, Rupinder,
some kind of.
what is wrong with the Norway model to you?
To me,
Yeah.
basically, it is we don't have a say
Yeah.
in what the rules are.
Yeah.
We don't have a seat in places where it is important. Great Britain have been a leading force in EU to create better things for everything, standards, education, military, all kind of things where we get together, and we have done fantastically
But
well.
do you not understand that-
Somehow,
But I think you need to realise that it's not governments that are buying the goods or governments that are selling the goods. It's individual people that are buying the goods. It's companies that are selling them. All the governments do is allow
somehow-
the framework. If the French champagne makers want to sell their champagne into the United Kingdom, they'll still be able to.
they
do
will
it.
still be able to sell it.
And
What-
there
what
will
you-
be no problem.
What I am saying to you is, look, EU is a trading bloc, we can be a trading bloc. We can still trade even if we don't have a no deal whatsoever. But
Exactly.
what we'll miss is the speed and the
Why?
benefits
We
of
deal,
things.
I'm sorry, that's absolutely wrong, and the more so, and you touched on it slightly, in this internet world and in the way that we can communicate so quickly across the world. I've imported goods through my business from China, and they come as quickly, if not more quickly, as goods that come in from Europe. That's the world we live in. We don't live in this world where you have to be next door.
I have to say to you, you can only import things from China which are approved. Yeah?
Absolutely.
There is a list of things which are approved.
No.
If you want to order anything, anything at
What do you
all,
mean, what's not approved? You don't want to buy narcotics from China, okay? That's
no, if
great.
you want to buy food stuff, an undisclosed quantity, you can't. Okay, there's a quota on things. There is a barriers in things, yeah. For very
we
right
have-
thing, you put
Hang
this
on, we have regulations in this country.
you
In the
somehow
same way as
think-
if someone sells a car in this country,
Yes.
it has to fit with the regulations that a car, it has to have the lights at a certain height and the flashing at the certain thing and the
Yes.
engine emissions at this sort of thing. That's the same in every country across the world.
But they're not
And
the
we'll
same
still
in every
have-
country.
No, they're not the
They're
same
slightly different.
regulations.
They are slightly different.
And we have a set of
every country has to
every
has
country,
their own
and we have a set
regulations.
of regulations which at the current time we share with Europe.
We do at the moment.
And that means that there's a level of protection, there's a level of quality to those regulations, which frankly is better than we will end up with if we do a trade deal with Trump or we do a separate trade
Why
deal
do you think
with,
our
with-
regulations
if we
are going
do
to
a
get
special-
worse? Why wouldn't they get better?
Because companies who control the negotiations in the United States, the rich who will control those negotiations, will want to lower those regulations.
Why?
And actually,
Julian, can I-
we've been told that
Julian,
by
can
the
I-
Brexit people
just
that they
a-
want to do it. One more point,
Go on.
that they want to do that. But secondly, in terms of trade with China, actually, which country in Europe does the most trade with China? Germany. Guess what? They're in the EU.
No, but okay,
Fine,
so
it just
we're
shows
go-
that
we're
they
go-
can trade
We're just
outside.
going on about Germany. So the day after Brexit vote happened and we were going to leave with Brexit won.
They're in recession.
The German car manufacturers met Angela Merkel, the Chancellor, and they said to them, we don't want no deal. We want to organise everything when Britain are going to leave, that it stays the way that it is. And they will do that. The German car manufacturers will know that they'll lose 10-20% because the UK is the biggest market for them outside of Germany. So we're not going to have.
So what's your point?
So the point is,
that we're
I
out
do
to
think.
trash
No.
German
I don't
car
think we're never going to
manufacturers.
trash. German economy is not growing at the same level as the UK economy.
It's in
is gonna
recession
grow.
at the moment.
But what I'm going to say is, Germany won't allow that. Just like France won't allow that. I think because we've got this whole EU umbrella, that it is almost like a scaremonger.
Okay, so I think this is an important one because what you're suggesting is that somehow the EU it's the EU's fault that this whole thing has got to the state we're in terms
Well,
of
I think David
negotiations.
Cameron did both.
That somehow the German car manufacturers are behind the negotiation and wrecking the whole negotiation.
No, they won't wreck the
Actually,
they want everything. They want ties to be set up.
The biggest
if
thing,
they
the
leave.
biggest thing that has stopped Brexit actually happening, and I'm glad that it stopped it, even though I have nothing in common with these people. The biggest thing that stopped it is the DUP. But actually, the real problem there was that there was actually a threat to peace in Ireland. That wasn't about German car manufacturers.
manufactured,
That was
threat
because
to
suddenly, Tory backwoods people suddenly discovered that actually we have a peace agreement in Ireland and that they were putting it at risk. They'd never even thought of it.
Julian,
Outrageous.
Julian,
that they
can I
had
ask you-
put the
can I ask
peace
you
of
one
Northern
question?
Ireland at risk without even
It's
considering
not
it.
at risk.
That, of course it's at risk because once you start having a border in a country where many people see themselves as being Irish rather than British,
already a border.
and it's a completely porous border,
And it'll stay
It's
that
a
way.
There's no
technology,
guarantee.
well,
that-
Yeah, there is,
technology,
because
will they not have
because
that?
we've
Everybody
said-
has said that's been tested, hasn't it? Well, I think we've been back and forward
No.
to Europe with this myth of let's have a technology, a free border, which will just be technology. and
We've
nobody
said
can-
that we
nobody
won't
can find
put a
it.
hard
It
border.
doesn't exist.
The Irish have said they won't put a hard border, and the EU have said they won't put a hard border. So who is going to actually put up this border that
Hang
you
on a sec.
think we're going to be
You're
putting
saying
up
that,
there?
but you're completely not answering the question which is relevant to the border question. Is the integrity of the single market? Yeah, you can't have open border and just keep on moving things backwards and forwards.
But if you have a free trade deal, then it's
if you
not
want,
an issue.
if you want a free trade deal, then you have to abide by the rules and regulations.
No, you don't.
No,
So you have to
the free trade deal with Europe is being in the EU.
Yeah.
That's what it looks
No,
like.
not at
That's
all.
what allows
But
the free movement
That's
of
because
goods.
we've got an inept government
what
that
allows the
couldn't
free movement
negotiate
of
properly.
goods.
But if I can just take one little step back here, very slightly, and just move the debate slightly differently. These were the discussions that we were having before the referendum as to what would happen in terms of trade.
Northern Ireland was never ever mentioned.
well,
I don't. Do you remember Northern Ireland being mentioned
all of these
during the
discussions
referendum?
about international
Was
trade,
Gibraltar
about
mentioned?
yes, it was mentioned, and in fact, I was in Gibraltar not long after the vote, and there was a huge office
And
there.
guess what?
that-
Gibraltar
that-
voted
the-
to
the
remain.
vote- the Gibraltar voted to remain. They're in a slightly different situation. But the point
The
that I'm making
Europeans.
is these debates that we had about trade and about how the flow of goods and all this sort of thing were the debates that we were having and should have been having, and most of us were involved in before the referendum. But I think now, once that decision has been taken, once you've had that referendum, the people have spoken, they made a decision, you may not have liked it, and you may not have liked it.
It's not about
but
liking.
the decision was taken by the British people on a democratic vote. In fact, the
based on lies?
No. The
Based on
Remainers,
misinformation?
the Remainers,
No accountability, no scrutiny, no
the
control of the
Remainers,
finances.
a £9 million
That's what you call
leaflet
democracy?
paid for by the taxpayer, with the government, whole machinery, and the civil service trying to tell us to
was
remain.
Hang on a second.
It was
Well,
not the
look,
same
you-
choice.
Okay, you
We
can
now
answer one
face
question.
a
You can answer
different
one
choice.
question. Yeah. Do you like United Kingdom as United Kingdom?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So Scottish people voted to remain. Yeah. They are.
No.
They are
Rupinder, can I
voting
ask you on that
keen.
front? We had Scotland had an
Had
independence
its referendum.
referendum.
They did.
Yeah,
They had the choice to separate
and they
themselves.
said they wanted to remain.
They want to remain.
Okay,
Yes, absolutely.
But
So
how
now
come
have to be part
if
of
they're
the
saying
UK?
that if they started saying that we want a second referendum, would we just accept that and say
No, no,
yeah?
no,
because-
look,
Absolutely.
look,
Absolutely.
they are saying-
Absolutely. Why not?
because-
what is this with democracy? It's
Okay,
like,
but then
it's
you-
like
but
hang on a
then-
minute. It's this is I can't
So you
believe
keep
this argument.
voting until you get the decision
Yeah.
you want.
Democracy is not like sugar. It's not like something that's nice in small amounts, but don't have too much of it because it'll be bad for you. Democracy is democracy. If people want to change their minds, they have a right to change
would
their
it
minds.
be every 4
not
years
just
that we
change
just
their
keep doing
minds.
that?
It's about.
Being an
It's
like
not
a
even.
yo-yo.
It's not even just about changing their minds. It's about the fact that the situation is entirely different to what it was 3 years ago.
you are happy
We
to-
now know. People now know. And not just people, but the politicians who led us to this situation, who hadn't thought about half of this stuff, we now know what the situation
But
is
Julian-
actually likely to be look like. It's, people use loads of analogies. I like the one about houses, where you put in an offer on a house and then you get a survey done. And then you discover, actually,
They're all false.
then
it's
how-
going to
okay,
fall
so-
down.
so-
So you sort of think, maybe I won't move. Maybe where I was is actually a little
So
bit
if
better.
you went now, so
and you
obviously,
change your mind.
what is Labour's stance on the second referendum? Do you want it or do you not want it?
We are internationalist party. Simple as that. It's simple as
so
that.
you want it or you don't want it?
Well, some of your party does, and some of your party doesn't. You're split down the middle, really, aren't you?
we don't clone people, Keith.
No,
if you
you
haven't
don't
noticed,
clone
yeah?
people,
We
but
don't clone people.
You're
yeah?
as split as the Tories are. The
No,
Tories are
hang
too
on
scared
a
to be here
You-
today,
you-
but
you
at
can
least
put-
you're
you-
here.
You can at least
Well, they had
be
a
fair.
meeting. Tories had a meeting. That's why they could have their meeting.
Yeah,
It was
at
like
least be
that.
fair. Our people who have, we don't clone people, so the people have an independent mind. But large chunk of the labor ethos, large chunk of the labor policy is absolutely solidarity with the rest of the world. We were internationalist party, proud to be internationalist party.
There is a problem,
Yeah,
though, isn't there? Which
simple.
is your internationalism seems to be slightly tempered, and Emily Thornberry said it again today, and she said it yesterday, where she's not comfortable. She's saying that actually we're not sure about this freedom of movement, and actually that to me that is the test of being an internationalist party. For me, for young people in this country, for young people in Europe, freedom of movement is a freedom. It's a huge opportunity.
but you
It's
said
not
that's
about
part of
freedom to travel.
I think it is about
No,
freedom
it's
to
about
travel
freedom
and
to
live
work
and to work.
and to live and to work.
Actually, it's about more than that. It is currently about more than that, but it is absolutely it's a freedom.
So
and
you
I
don't
think we
believe
should
that
value it.
you
I
don't
think we
believe that a
value
country
it.
should have any immigration restrictions in or out at all
I
across
think
the
that
world?
I think that immigration restrictions are problematic. I'm not entirely sure
So you would
where and when they should be. Where
you'd
and when
have
they
an
should
Julian,
exist.
you'd have an
But I
open door
would
policy.
say
No borders?
what I would say is, I'm personally in favour of no borders. But
Okay,
but
well, you're an
even-
idealist.
but in
My
terms
point is
of but in
fascinating.
terms of Europe, I absolutely think that freedom of movement was a step forward for people, for young people. The opportunities that it presents in terms of is a tremendous.
It's driven down
Yeah, to be
wages
honest,
in this
it's-
country.
No, that's
Like
a myth.
absolute-
That's a
Oh,
myth.
no,
All
it's
the
not.
studies.
All the studies say that it's driven down the
Okay,
wages,
okay.
that we've had
Show me one
relatively
study that does
cheap
it. Let's-
European labour coming into this
Go on,
country.
Julian.
Let's be truthful. Let's be truthful about the immigrant drive the wages down. Yeah. Do you know about toll per martyrs? Yeah. Toll per martyrs. Yeah. In 18th century. Yeah. They were asking for living wage. They were sent to Australia. Was there an immigrant in that time? It is a purely
No, no.
man-made misery
No, no.
inflicted on other man.
No, no. The problem with this.
You want
no,
to
no, no.
make
You're
division in people to say
But you're
that somebody has
misconstruing
a
it.
fault.
I'm sorry, you're misconstruing
No,
it.
you're not.
Nobody has said that there should be no immigration. Nobody has said that. The problem has been that it's been uncontrolled mass immigration. And just to put another little facet on this, there's been a big problem because we don't have a level playing field. So that you can come in from Poland or Germany or France or any of the European countries and come into this country and work and live and whatever without any restriction at all. But if you happen
You can
to
do as well.
but
You
yes,
can do as well.
no, but if you happen to live in one of the Commonwealth countries,
Yes.
or you happen to live in America,
Yeah.
or any other places across the world, the restrictions that are placed on you are
I'm
increasingly
absolutely
tight.
amazed.
And I'm amazed
People
to
like
hear.
you
and
come
I'm
on the program and then somehow champion that they are the champions of workers' rights from Commonwealth country.
but I'm amazed that
people on your
sorry.
side of the argument, do every single thing they can to jeopardize international sovereignty.
No, absolutely wrong.
To wipe out the workers' right.
No,
Rupinder, you can't just say that.
I'm
but
sorry.
How can you just so someone could turn around and say, oh, it was you could turn around and say, oh, Tony Blair opened an open door immigration policy so that 1 million Polish people into the UK to drive down their wages for the people that we're building.
It didn't go down.
It didn't happen.
It didn't go down.
Yeah, but
I find it quite amazing.
What about all the other
I find it
infrastructure?
quite
So you can't
amazing
say
that
on either side.
we're on a Sikh television channel. You're a Sikh person with obviously contacts beyond Europe, and yet the restrictions to bring people into this country from India and across the Commonwealth.
Are you seriously
is so
suggesting?
difficult. Well, it should be a level playing field.
Are you seriously
I find it
suggesting that
incredible.
the Brexiters are in favour of taking down immigration controls to the rest of the world?
They were not.
No,
it's a
you
point.
are
It's a
totally
saying
misconstruing what I'm saying.
It's clearly
What I'm
a
saying is a
point.
level playing
Can
field.
I want to come
If
back
you
to
want to bring in a brain surgeon
one at a time.
If you want to bring in a brain surgeon from India, you have to jump through hoops. If you want to bring in anybody who's even unskilled from Poland, they can just walk through the door.
But the immigration
That is the
controls that are
point.
being proposed are actually no better than that, because they are talking about, and that, unfortunately I think this applies to Labour as well. There's this idea that you have to be earning 30,000 in order to get in. You have to be earning 30,000, which is atrocious in terms of my babackground is in music. There's very few musicians who actually make a career on an internet anything like that.
It's going to be a point. It's a shortage or a crazy employment law.
Nigel made a post in last election saying that there are immigrants coming from Turkey.
Yes.
That's not a part of EU. Now these people are saying, oh no, we don't want any discrimination against people coming from outside EU. Really?
Okay,
Rupinder,
let
come back to Rupinder's earlier point.
Let me stop that. So you're saying that poster or what have you.
Yeah.
So that was really about in Germany. Was it 2016 when 2 million migrants came over, that they were supposed to get from Syrian camps?
Yes.
But they didn't. Not many did come from Syrian camps. They came up from other. The economic migrants.
That's not true.
They weren't their vast majority. They were saying that it was about 20% in the studies that came through Germany. And the thing is,
not what I said. We should take more Syrian refugees.
Absolutely, we should.
So the
Nigel
Conservatives
Farage said that. So you really need to get your facts straight.
Then I support Nigel Farage on taking more Syrian refugees.
One minute. The way that Britain got the Syrian refugees there was by going into the camps, vetting them, and bringing them over with their families. So they were actually getting true Syrians that have been affected by the wars there and coming back.
The Syrian tragedy is clearly going to affect Europe. There were, something like a third of the population of Syria has been displaced.
Yep.
The country that has the most refugees in the world is Lebanon. It's not Europe. They haven't come to Europe. Some have come to Europe. And Germany, actually, and I applaud Germany, was relatively open about that and allowed people in.
Because of the population shortage.
They
had a shortage in people that are working because of the growing older population.
There may have been all sorts of stuff going on like that. I'm sure that's true, but nevertheless, there was, generally speaking, an open policy. We have struggled to let more than a handful of children.
So can I ask you?
A handful of children in. We have unaccompanied children sitting in Calais who can't get in, who are desperate just to be looked after. It's outrageous. But I wanted to come back to. I just want to come back to Rupinder's earlier point, because I think it's a fantastic one about the Tolpodal martyrs. First of all, the evidence does not show that immigration from Poland and from Eastern Europe has reduced wages. The evidence simply isn't there. But secondly, even if the evidence was there, the way to deal with that is through workers' organisation. Absolutely, and that people collectively fight for decent wages. We have a minimum wage. We also have, stronger trade unions, unfortunately, which have, over the last 20, 30 years have got a lot weaker. That is the way to protect people's
Julian, can I ask one question? So we can argue about...
And actually, the traditions in Birmingham, to give an example, of immigrant workers playing a key role in building the trade union movement is absolutely,
Julian,
there.
To change up to that, because we're just going to argue about the pros and cons about immigration all night long. What do you think is going to happen with Brexit now? We'll go individually. What do you think is going to happen now? Because now we're supposed to leave on the 12th of April, yeah?
Yeah.
And with no deal, we could leave, in theory, because we've got indicative votes. But we even go to indicative votes and, nothing's happening with that, where there's no clear side of what's going to happen. So what do you think will happen on that day?
Okay, well, if I knew, I wouldn't be here. I'd be down the bookies.
So what do you reckon would happen?
What do I think? Honestly, I think that hope. I mean, it's so hard to divide what you think and what you hope. But I suppose what I think is that somehow Parliament is going to have to reflect the fact that the country is massively, it is sort of divided, but it's not actually that divided, because most people probably get that we need a reasonably close relationship with Europe. So I think that probably Parliament will end up reflecting the fact that most people think that we need something other than a hard Brexit. So we might end up with some sort of a soft Brexit agreed in Parliament, but then, and I really hope this happens, and I think actually the chances are quite high, then people get a second chance to decide whether that is really what they want, or whether they think that actually remaining in the EU, with all its faults, turns out to be the
Can I
better
ask you a
option.
question then? So you say we'll get that second vote coming through. We might get that question.
I think we,
What happens if then the public say they don't want that
Well,
and they want a Brexit?
then
Would you
we have to leave.
honour that?
Of course.
We're like, no
Of course.
questions.
So what
And
would you want to make
because
the
then
first
we
time?
know. Because then we know what we got. Well, we didn't have anything on offer. We had what we were offered the first time round was the opportunity to leave the EU. People went for it. Turns out leaving the EU isn't that straightforward.
So
now
Keith,
we know.
what would be your prognosis? What would happen on the 12th of April?
I think it can go a number of different ways. It's quite possible that Mrs May will ask for a longer extension, and then she'll kick it into the long grass, and we'll just be discussing the same issues for another few months or another year or so, which is painful for everybody. We've discussed these things ad infinitum. To my mind, the country needs to move on, which is exactly why David Cameron had to give a referendum in the first place, so that you actually finally make a decision on something and then move on. The trouble is, we made a decision, and he just refused to, or the Conservatives have refused to move on and actually implement that decision. What we should be doing is turning around and saying, the European Union have not given us a satisfactory deal. It's quite clear it's not satisfactory to our MPs, most of whom are Remainers anyway, because they turned it down. They've had 3 votes already. They might even get a 4th go at it, and they've turned it down by record amounts the first 3 times. So it's quite clear that that so-called deal, that treaty, is unsatisfactory. We should turn around to them and say, if you don't give us what we actually want, and part of the problem is Mrs May doesn't really know what she wants, we should just leave. We should leave on WTO terms, and we can always negotiate a free trade deal and any other trading arrangements once we've left. But at least then we'll be a strong position. We'll save the £39 billion. £39 billion. How many hospitals you can pay for that? How many homeless people you can get off the streets for that? How many schools you can fund for that? She's given £39,000 million to the EU for nothing in return.
I'm trying to work out how we'll be in a stronger position.
We'll be in a stronger position if we can retain that. If we can retain that money, if we can make our own laws once again, if we can control what's coming into the country and make our own arrangements, and then negotiate any free trade deals we want once we're under that regime, we will be so much better off. That's a real deal for jobs and for the economy and for the welfare of the British people, and that's what I would like to see us do.
And Rupinder, what about yourself? What do you think is going to happen?
I hope common sense will prevail. I hope that Tory madness will stop, and they will start making sense out of this, and we will not be held, at a ransom by a minority who have nothing but ideological hatred for the EU. And it is,
But Corbyn's the Brexiteer.
Corbyn's Brexit
He doesn't like
is completely different.
But he doesn't like
Anthony
EU.
Wedgwood Ben,
No,
maybe.
look, nobody, I don't think you will get anybody in whole England or UK who will say EU is perfect by any standard. Yeah? So we all have a desire to modify those things, improve those things, but the place to do that is within EU.
Didn't we try that?
Well, I don't believe
people
David
still
Cameron
try.
tried anything.
Okay.
If David Cameron had tried anything, he would have helped the country. He didn't. It's a bizarre kind of thing to say that we tried. David Cameron was incompetent by any standard.
Rupinder, can I ask one
I wouldn't
question?
argue with you on
Yeah,
that.
Rupinder, can I ask one question then? So, because the Labour, we still don't know clearly what you just say. I know you want closer ties, or you don't want a relationship, which you can say. One of the other things that Corbyn's and the Labour Party really want is a general election. What's your push for that? Especially when we're trying to leave the EU.
We are a democratic party. We made that decision in our conference. It is not It's not Jeremy Corbyn who made that decision. It
Okay.
is a conference which makes that decision.
So why do
yeah?
you need another general
No,
election?
we in the conference passed a resolution that we will try everything we can to get a general election.
Is that to stop
yeah?
Brexit?
No, not stop the Brexit. No, we accepted it. Brexit is accepted, but we want the Brexit which is suitable for the best of this country. Yeah, we want as close tie as we can.
But do you
have.
see how that can annoy people? Because then
Why?
it's not Brexit then, is it? You can have a customs union, free movement of people. So what did people vote for?
You
They
don't have
just-
to have free movement of people. It can be a kind of movement of people. But look, at the end of the day, yeah, whatever your reason to vote for EU was, yeah, I don't believe for 1 second that there anybody who can genuinely say, I voted in referendum to leave EU because I want to be poorer. I want my children's chances
No, it'll
to
make
be
us better
diminished.
off
Yeah.
if we're out.
But then that's just a
But that's your
assumption.
fantasy.
slogan,
That's
you
your
see.
fantasy.
It's just a slogan that
is
the
your,
Labour
that
people
is your
come out with.
fantasy. Yeah.
Of course, nobody votes to be
That's
poorer
that's
because they
your
know
fantasy.
that they'll be able to
You
trade
don't want to
better.
reduce. You don't want to reduce the trade with the EU. Yeah. You want to increase, but you want to impede it. Yeah.
No, I don't want to impede
somehow.
it. I want a free trade deal.
You want a free trade deal, but you don't want.
We can have a free trade
you
deal.
don't want to
come back to the general election.
At the
Come back
moment,
to
we
the-
can't negotiate a free trade deal with any other country across the world because we're bound by the rules of
Okay,
the EU.
guys.
Once
Keith,
we're out of the
simple.
EU, we
We've
can
been-
negotiate
Yeah,
with
no,
the
that's what I'm saying.
United
See, look
States.
how this discussion's gone for the last half.
It's simple.
This is it. This is the reason why we can't get Brexit.
It might-
Because look at the way we're arguing over this with no
Okay.
clear policy
No,
or
so,
no
so
way
on that,
forward.
so, and that brings us back to the issue of the European of the general election, possibility of a general election, because it is a problem. It clearly is a problem that we could end up going into a general election where there are obviously at least two Tory parties, one which is hard Brexit, one which is soft Brexit
Two Labour
with a
parties.
bit
Yeah.
of Remain, and yes, and I think there are also two
They're very
Labour
small
parties.
section
I
of
think
the Labour Party.
there's a Corbynite wing of the Labour Party, or some within that, who are in favour of Brexit, who also see things very much in terms of we can solve all these things inside the nation state, just like the Rees Moggs of this world do. So there's two Tory parties, and to give them their due, then there's whatever it is now. There's
The Brexit Party.
ex-UKIP, now Brexit Party.
They're two
that
separate.
probably-
They're two separate.
That
that probably
Yeah.
so and then in terms of the number of people that all those different parties will get voting for them, what will happen probably is that the Tories, despite their divisions, will get a huge number of seats, and Labour will get a huge number of seats, and then parties like mine, the Green Party, and even parties like the Brexit Party will be hugely underrepresented. So we won't solve the argument, and we won't even have the opportunity to solve the argument, because large swathes of the country will be entirely unrepresented.
So we want PR.
Which is why we need proportional
Oh, well, I
representation.
can agree with you on that.
Good,
I've changed
because-
my mind over the last few
Well,
years,
there
and
you
I'd agree
go.
with you on
because and actually,
But didn't you have a vote
actually,
for
well,
PR?
actually, in terms of we had a vote for alternative vote, which wasn't really a form of PR, and absolutely at the moment, nobody's talking about it. It's not a big debate, but it is interesting if you look at most of the European countries which practice proportional representation. Actually, most of the world practices proportional representation of some form or another. Actually, you see coalitions and you see parties working together, and with disagreements and with arguments, and there's all sorts of problems, and there's a rising hard right across Europe. I know all those things are true, but nevertheless, what you actually have is if you look at the Scandinavian countries in particular, you have an ability to cooperate, which is actually meaning that in terms of social cohesion, in terms of dealing with reducing inequality in this country is going through the roof. That's one of our major problems. That's, I think, one of the reasons for the Brexit vote. But actually, those countries where there is PR, somehow they manage to talk to each other in a more grown-up way, and we actually get a sort of politics which works.
Well, in 2015, of course, UKIP got over 3 million votes, nearly 4 million votes, and one MP back as a result.
Yeah.
It's just totally unjust.
And the Green Party
and the
was
Green
in a very
Party,
similar
a
position.
similar
But
situation.
I think we've still got the whole Brexit thing, that we've got the issue that's going for. But we can see from the arguments that we're having how hard it's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you've got a new, so for example, if Labour won the general election, Corbyn is in power.
Yes.
Yeah, which businesses are fearing even more than Brexit. Yeah. So if that happened,
Yeah.
what would Labour do? What would you'll be fighting between yourselves?
we-
Conservatives will be back against your opposition.
Our take on this is still going to be the same. We are internationalist party. We want the as close relationship with the EU as possible. Yeah.
Which means no
Sim- sim-
Brexit.
Well,
it-
Mr. Corbyn's so internationalist, he has friends in Hamas and Hezbollah.
Well, you look, if you're going to make that kind of comment, yeah, We can have a very long discussion.
Yeah,
on this
that's-
kind of
but then-
matter.
but you see-
if you want to make peace with the people, you have to call them friends. If that is not your understanding how to make a peace, then I think you can learn a thing or two from.
I could accept that
Yeah.
if he would meet on other sides of the argument, but of course he doesn't. He refuses to meet the other side of the argument, just like he refused to meet the Unionists in Ireland, but he did meet with the IRA. So, you know, Corbyn has some very
he's the
dubious
MP
policies.
in Parliament. What are you all about? He's sitting in Parliament. What are you all about? Who we need to meet? He's sitting.
No, I'll give you an example. There was a few weeks
bizarre.
ago when the MPs were all sitting down together in a room, and he refused to go into that room because there's a Labour MP that's left, and that now the new party,
That's
the
right,
Independent
Chuck
Party.
That was
Yeah,
ridiculous.
And he
That
left.
was
But
ridiculous.
then you know we're saying about our childish behaviour here. Look,
Yeah.
we've argued for 20, 30 minutes.
Well, I went to a
He
meeting.
could be future Prime
Yeah,
Minister,
he could be-
and he still should have sat in that room with everybody, shouldn't he, instead of leaving.
I went to
I
a
would say
conference.
if there is going to be a meaningful conversation, then you have to say we are looking for some alternatives there. Yeah. Sit
But
down
do you think
and
it was
let's
right-
have
but do you think he
But
should have
if
sat
you
down?
say I would just come and you can just entertain the Theresa May's ideas. That is not.
No, no,
that
no,
is
everyone
not-
else
that is
was
not
there to talk
conversation.
about it.
I was at a
They're not
conference yesterday
conversation.
here in Birmingham,
Yeah.
and I heard one ex-Labour MP,
Yeah.
Ian Austin, and I heard another current Labour MP, which is Ruth Smeeth, both talking about the institutional racism going on within the Labour Party at the moment. And that's absolutely frightening. So if Corbyn were to get anywhere near being in number 10, it's totally frightening.
But the thing that is really frightening here about that is that actually what we've seen since the Brexit vote is a huge increase in hate crime. That's the frightening.
But do you think if
Now,
Brexit
I'm
didn't
not-
occur,
you
it'd
know,
be even
I
worse?
think that if those people, frankly, who we saw chanting outside Downing Street on Friday night, you know, the Tommy Robinsons of this world, I think if those people feel like they've won, actually, that's bad news.
That's
That's
what was
bad
he
news
chanting
for
that you
social.
disagreed
That's
with?
bad news for social
What was he-
inclusion
yeah.
because I don't know what he was chanting. Thankfully, I wasn't there.
Okay.
But Tommy Robinson.
But then
and
he
those
might just be
people-
saying Brexit. We want
those-
Brexit, we voted Brexit.
You know that Tommy Robinson stands for a lot more than Brexit, and
But he's
a
with
much
no
more
major party
dangerous
now, is he?
person. Well, he's now in league with UKIP.
Yeah, but UKIP, a lot of
my point is
people
not
like
just
Kieth-
about
Kieth
him.
has left UKIP
My point
because
is
of
not
that.
just about him. That I think that we have seen. I mean, it's interesting. We've seen two things. We've seen a rise in hate crime. We've seen a rise in attacks on Muslims. We've seen a rise in attacks on synagogues. We've seen a rise in all sorts of real viciousness since the Brexit vote, and it's not unrelated. And it's not unrelated to a general rise in populism.
But that's happening
and
in the
right-wing
EU as
politics
well.
across. Absolutely. But I think that a defeat for Brexit is actually a defeat for that sort of politics, and it's a
Defeat
victory.
for democracy.
It's
Oh,
no, it's a
you just said
victory
a
had a
defeat for
yeah,
social.
voted.
It's a victory for inclusion. It's a victory for anti-racism. I'm absolutely
had
convinced
a
of that. I
referendum.
think it would be really bad news.
Okay,
you
so
raise a
terms.
point. Keith, you raise a point about institutional racism in the Labour Party. At the same time, you refuse to say anything that your favorite man Nigel Farage did all that, incited all kind of racism.
I don't believe he
in the
did.
election.
No, he didn't incite any
So
racism.
making
What
posters
race-
about
what race did he- hang
about
on.
immigrants coming over,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Hang on. What
that's
race-
built
What,
a
what
race
race did
relationship.
he? What race did he?
Well, the Turks.
Incite
But
racism against? Turks aren't a race.
No,
they're a
hang on,
nationality.
it's clearly people who are coming in this country
Oh, so-
from outside. Yeah.
So yes, he talked about immigration,
Yeah.
but he didn't make it specific to any race
So,
or
do
oppose
you-
any
do-
particular.
do-
In fact, he wanted a level playing field, which
So-
is the point I was making earlier in the programme. He wanted a level playing field between people coming in from the Commonwealth and other countries, as well as from Europe. And at the moment, it is totally biased towards people coming in from Europe, who mainly are white people coming in from Europe, rather than having a level playing field.
It's
for
a
all
laughable.
types.
It's a
The idea that Farage
it's
is
a
going to
laughable
be-
thing to think
it's going to be
that
in-
somehow you have become a champion.
Well,
for
you should
those
listen to
people's-
what he says,
people's life.
because the Commonwealth...
It's a laughable.
No,
Come on.
the Commonwealth was a major part...
You can
of
do
the,
better. You can do better than that.
The
Rupinder,
Commonwealth
you-
was a
you-
major
you-
part of the
You can,
thrust of
you
it.
can have a go at other parties and stuff like that, but and okay, you've got your open border policy that you two think are okay, and stuff like that. But many viewers may not agree with it. Many viewers may agree with it. But everyone has that right too. Every country has their right for their own sort of border control. Even India has
We have
border
about-
control.
we have
Pakistan and
border
Bangladesh
control.
have border sort of control with who's allowed in, who's not allowed in with their numbers.
To still come to UK, you still need a passport.
Every
Unlike
country,
Europe, you can go
yeah,
with a
every
passport.
country in the world's got that sort of immigration policy.
But there's
Yeah,
also the
no,
question.
nobody is disputing. Well, when did I say?
So what we're
the-
trying to say is the people that voted Brexit, and I know it offends people that might have left views, people that voted Brexit,
Yeah.
and you can say, as soon as the word mentioned immigration, they think racism.
Yes.
It could be nationalism. It could be the fact that you think, it's a social, the issues on social, education, housing. People voted on that reason that they weren't seeing the benefits for themselves, and maybe Labour voters were voting for that, and maybe even Corbyn saw that himself, and that's why he was non-EU.
Look, nobody is saying that if you have a view on immigration, you can't raise it. Yeah, that you can't do.
But you're having a go at Nigel Farage and other people.
Because there is a hypocrisy.
But then if I came up and I stood and I said I don't want open door immigration in
mine. If he
mind.
was saying, let's say how people coming from outside EU, from Commonwealth country, they've been discriminated again compared to the EU. Let's easy things up for them. Yeah, let's fasten things up. Let's easy. If they've been campaigning for years and years on what to say, why are you making these kind of rules which is making it difficult for people to come from non-EU country? I'll be very happy with him to raise these things. Yeah, but people from his side of the political argument have never ever done that.
Yes, they have. You want to listen to the argument. The point is, it should be a level playing field. And
What is
level playing field means that you have exactly the same rules.
So why don't
Australia has a level playing
field? Why don't you
like
champion that?
Australia,
why don't I see
why not
never
champion freedom of movement for the rest of the world then? if you want a
Nigel
level playing
Farage's big argument on this was to have an Australian-style points system, and that point system would apply exactly the same, whatever country.
How many times you have
once
gone
again-
to campaign against the people who are waiting to be deported on those centres? Have you ever gone there to campaign that these people don't lock these people up? Have you done that? Have you ever done that? Have you ever gone and say these people who coming from outside EU have a very restriction? You have to provide a certain amount of money and resources.
Well, I'm
Rupinder, we got Rupinder, sorry,
You don't do that.
We've only got 2 minutes left now.
The hostile
Julian,
environment has not been applied to
Julian,
it's been applied to people from the Caribbean and actually to people from the Western Commonwealth.
Julian, we've got less than 2 minutes now. Just
Wow.
to summarise it, we've been arguing for the last half an hour. There is no way, just by us talking, that we could ever set a deal up ourselves. If you had individual parties, we wouldn't get any deal through. So do you understand why the public are sick and tired of this now? And we know that nothing is happening. We're just waiting. We're just in a limbo with no policies, nothing going through.
That's why we took a decision. We had a referendum. We took a decision. Once you've made that decision, get on with it and implement it. That's what we need to do.
Okay, so my point about that is that sort of straight give the majority all the rights thing is really, really dangerous.
You don't
We
believe
had
in
a very
democracy?
close. I do believe in democracy, and I believe, therefore, in the rights of minorities as well. And actually, we had a very close vote, and that means that you do have to keep the discussion going, and you do have to find a
Keith,
way of
you've got
working
20
together.
seconds as well.
Yep, we made that decision. We should get on with it. We should leave the EU on WTO terms as soon as possible, get on with managing our own affairs, save the money, and make this country an even better place to live in.
And
So
Rupinder?
in your sense, you are saying 48% of the people who voted, even in that referendum, with lies and all kind of misinformation, no accountability, no scrutiny, no control over the money, yeah? Somehow, those people should be ignored completely. Absolutely. Just because you won by lying, by giving
Rupinder, we
I
can't say
haven't
we're
lie
lying.
on anything.
Okay, Keith, and guys, thanks a lot for your time. Now you've seen just how hard it is for here just to discuss these few issues. So I don't know what's going to happen on the 12th of April. Hopefully we'll come to some sort of arrangement, and hopefully we will have Brexit. Or we won't have Brexit. We don't know either way it's going to happen. But all the guys, all the viewers, thanks a lot for watching. Please stay tuned. We love these sort of shows where we can have debates and get to the nooks and crannies of politics. Thanks a lot for watching Sangat TV, and goodbye.